Hey guys, Stacy Jenkins here again from Jenkins Forever Farm. Today we're doing our e-learning lesson all about chickens. Hopefully you guys like my new hairdo. I woke up this morning kind of looking like a rooster, and so I thought I would embrace it and just go ahead and be a rooster today. So everybody can say hi. This is Macy, one of our resident roosters. He's not used to being on camera, so he's a little bit confused about what's going on. But I wanted to just take a few seconds to show you a couple differences between roosters and hens, and use Macy here as one of our models. So some of the main differences, other than the fact that a rooster is a male and a hen is a female, are their comb, which is this part up here, and their wattles, this part right here, are both a lot larger on a rooster. And two other ways you can really tell the difference between a rooster are their neck feathers, which on the rooster they're kind of long and pointed, where on a hen they're a little more round. And then it's a little harder to tell on this poor guy, but normally on a rooster their tail feathers are really long and they kind of curve over, where a hen's tail feathers just kind of end. Unfortunately for Macy, in the place where he lived before, someone came into the owner's backyard and chopped his tail feathers off, which that wasn't very kind. So those will grow back as he molts and loses those feathers, but for right now he's got a little bit of a shorter tail than most roosters would. Hi, buddy. The other thing with the roosters, and a lot of people know about their spurs, and it's kind of hard to tell on Macy because he's a younger rooster, but they have spurs here that they use, and they use those to help fight away predators. So on a female they are really small, and they're a lot bigger on a male because the roosters are the ones that helped to protect their flock. Anything else you can think of, buddy? Just checking things out. Well, while he's hanging here and he's doing okay, before we head off, you can kind of see behind me the chicken coop and run. We're going to do this e-learning episode in a couple different segments. So I'm going to do a little bit more here with Macy, and then we'll head back and go into the coop and the run for some more information. So just a little background on chickens. They are, okay buddy. Sorry, he was ready to get down. They are native to the tropical jungles of Southeast Asia, which is super far from where we live. Let me show you. 9,469 miles, super far. So you can see Indiana and Southeast Asia. So they're thought to be descendants from the red jungle fowl, and that was like their closest ancestor, and that's where the red jungle fowl was from, Southeast Asia. So at some point they were domesticated and made their way here to the US. Scientists also think, which is kind of interesting, that the chicken's closest relative is a T-Rex. So if you've ever met a chicken, you might agree they can be a little bit dinosaurish. So anyway, I talked about the difference between hens and roosters, and I'm going to talk about some of the parts of the rooster or the hen. So I showed you the wattles. Some people think that the wattles are used mostly from the rooster to alert the female hen to food. So whenever I go out and feed, the roosters will do this kind of dance and shake their head around, which makes their wattles flap back and forth. And they think the bigger the wattles, the more it'll catch the hen's attention, and that's what will call them to food. As far as the comb, the part on the top, like my comb here, they use that. Macy's talking to us. They use that to regulate their temperature. So chickens don't sweat like we do. So whenever they get hot, that blood goes up into their comb and cools off. And that's what helps them stay cool. Now, their wattles and their comb should be a nice bright red color. If it turns kind of a purple color or starts to lose some of its pigment, that's when we know something's wrong and it's time to head to the vet. So we like to see a nice bright red. Nice bright red. A couple other parts, the spurs I talked about, they use those to protect from predators. Another thing that people often don't know is that chickens have ears. So there's a little hole in the side of their head. It's usually covered with feathers, so it's a little hard to see, and they don't have a pronounced earlobe like humans do. But they do in fact have ears. So what you're hearing right now, I'll take a side note. You can hear some crowing from back in the chicken coop. So the roosters that are living in there and Macy are talking back and forth. One of the things I was going to talk about are the misconceptions about crowing. So everyone thinks, and all these children's books we've all read since we've been little tell us that roosters only crow at the crack of dawn. Totally not true. They literally crow all day. Anyone who's had a rooster knows that they crow for a lot of different reasons. Partly they can use their crow to alert their flock of danger. They might crow to show another rooster that this is my territory. They also crow whenever I feed them, so they're alerting their flock, their hens in their flock, that there's food, as if they found the food. And sometimes they crow because they feel like it. So they do tend to crow in the morning. That isn't untrue, but it's a misconception that they only crow at the crack of dawn. One of the other main questions that people ask me very often is, do hens lay eggs and poop out of the same hole? The answer is yes, they do. It's called the vent. They only have one hole. It all comes out that same hole. So here at Jenkins Forever Farm, we have 26 hens and 5 rooster residents. So we have quite a few. Most of them live in the chicken coop and run behind us, but we have 2 roosters and 2 hens that live in the barn, in the main barn. Macy being one of them. He is one of our disabled roosters, so he has a limpy leg, and so he lives in the main barn. That way nobody picks on him. So I'm gonna stop this segment and I will set up and we'll go back and tour the coop and the chicken run. I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, we're inside the chicken run and we're ready to start part 2. So as you can see behind me are all of our chickens and a couple, we have 3 roosters that live out here, and this is kind of their, and they'll probably be very vocal because I'm in their space, but this is kind of where they hang out during the daytime. The coop is attached to this run, and so there's a door on it and it opens and closes with the sunlight. So when the sun rises, the door opens and the chickens are free to come and go as they please all day, and then when the sun goes down, the door will close, and they have trained themselves to go inside the coop all before that door closes, so it's kind of interesting. They're pretty smart. So anyway, they just kind of hang out in here throughout the day. They've got food and water. We've got, you can see several different food and water containers. Some are hanging, some are sitting on the ground. Different birds have different preferences, so we kind of have different options for everybody. And then they're kind of spread out throughout the run as well, because chickens do live in flocks, and inside that flock is a pecking order. So there's someone who's in charge and someone who's at the very bottom. That's the rooster who's in charge, and everybody else fits kind of somewhere in between, and they all know where they are. So that pecking order determines who gets to eat first, what nesting box they get to get in, kind of a little bit of everything, just how life is run here. So if you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you're the last one to eat, and you have to kind of sleep wherever the last spot available is. So we'll talk about what they eat. So there is just a regular commercial chicken grain that we feed our chickens. Some people feed their chickens pellets, kind of like what the alpacas eat, but made for chickens. We do the crumble. I feel like it's a little easier maybe for them to eat, so I'll show you what that looks like. It's just a crumbled feed, and they will get in the feed and they'll scratch at it and they knock a lot out, but they'll eat it off of the ground too, and they kind of pick out what they want. The other things that we give them, free choice, like we talked about yesterday with the alpacas having hay free choice and minerals free choice, is we have 2 things. We have grit, which is just tiny little rocks, and that helps their digestive system just to work properly. And then we also have oyster shell free choice. So the oyster shell is just a good source of calcium, helps them to get back some of the nutrients that they lose when they lay eggs. So I'll show you what those look like. This is the grit. It's kind of hard to see in here, sorry. Little tiny rocks just is basically all it is. And just like the alpacas with their minerals, the chickens will eat the grit or the eggshell, or the oyster shell, excuse me, whenever they need it. So this is the oyster shell. It's just little crumbled up oyster shell. And again, they'll just eat those when they need it. They're looking at me because they want some treats. One of the things that we give them for a treat sometimes, which grosses a lot of people out, are dried mealworms. It's their favorite. So I'll show you what those look like. Pretty gross, literally dried worms. So if you don't like worms, you wouldn't like to feed these to them. But you'll see the chickens love them. It's one of their favorite treats and some good protein for them. One of the things that we do, that we also will feed them, are their eggs. So the red jungle fowl, which I talked about earlier, was the ancestor, the closest known ancestor of the chicken, laid 10 to 15 eggs per year. So unfortunately, humans have farmed chickens and manipulated and re-engineered their bodies to lay 300 plus eggs a year. So what we do is we feed a lot of the eggs back to them. It helps them give back some of the nutrients. It helps them to make sure they have enough calcium to create a hard shell, because the last thing we want is for an egg to break while it's inside their body. It could be really detrimental to their health. So a lot of people are really bothered by the fact that they eat eggs, but it's very natural. So I have one of their eggs that I got out of the coop just a few minutes ago. So I was going to show you how we just crack them. Some people will boil them, chop them up, and then feed them that way, but I honestly just don't have time to do that. So we just crack them and throw them out raw. And they'll go right over to it. A lot of times they'll eat the shell and all. So usually I'll break up a ton of them and feed them so they all can have some, but just for right now all I had is the one. One of the other things that people do to make the hens lay more is provide artificial light. So they have a sensor in their brain that works with the light and tells them when to lay eggs. And so some people will put lighting in their coops to make them feel like the day is longer. We would never do that. We don't do anything to encourage them to lay anymore. And in fact, a lot of the reasons that the hens come here is because they're no longer laying and people don't want them anymore. So we're fine with that. Obviously, the less they lay, the less health problems they have. So if they don't lay, that's totally fine with us. Let's see, what else? You can hear them crowing. Some people think that only the roosters make noise, but that's not true. Hens have up to 30 different unique sounds that they make. And if you listen, you can hear some of those sounds that they make. One of the most prominent is probably the cackling noise they make when they lay an egg. It sounds very uncomfortable, I'm sure it is. But they make all kinds of noise to talk to each other. And then the roosters continue to crow. Okay, so there are a lot of facts I thought I could share with you guys that you might not know about chickens. In a condition like this, where they live freely, you know, aren't forced to lay a lot of eggs, and are open to sunlight and nature, they can live 10 to 15 years, whereas a chicken who's kept in a farm, factory farm type situation is probably only going to live maybe 4 to 5 years if they're lucky. They love to roost up high, and you can see we've put several roosts in here. Usually they only roost up at night, and that's to keep themselves up off the ground, to keep themselves safe from predators. But they also like to get up on high spots during the day. So we've got several throughout the coop. It's hard to see some of them. Some are made out of lumber, and some we have, my parents gave me a bunch of large tree limbs from their backyard. So we use those to create some climbing spaces for the chickens as well. And I'll show you, once we go into their coop that they stay in at night, I'll show you all the roosts we have for them in there as well. Even though they're fairly safe in there, it's still just a natural instinct for them to feel healthy and safe. So we want to make sure and provide that for them. Chickens, although they're birds, cannot fly. They can, though, flap their wings, and what they do is they flap their wings and they get enough air under their wings that it boosts them up. So high enough to jump up onto like the roost you see here, or to get up in a tree if they were out in the wild, to get away from anyone who was going to try to harm them. One of the other things they do that's kind of interesting is they take dust baths. You heard that right. Kids, don't try this at home. You cannot take a bath in dirt and get clean, but that's what chickens do. So what they do is they'll scratch out an area, and several of them will use the same dirt bath, and what they do is they're rolling around and flicking that dirt and dust all over them to get rid of excess oils and to help get rid of external parasites like lice and mites. Chickens are omnivores. That means that they not only eat seeds and grass and plants and all these different things, but they also eat things like insects, which you saw with the mealworms, and they even eat mice. They're very talkative today. Let's see. I don't know this for sure, but a lot of scientific facts have been put out that the chickens can see in full color. So I'm not sure how they figured that out, but I'm going to trust them. They also are known to have REM while they're sleeping, which is rapid eye movement. So they believe that they dream, which is kind of a cool fact. One other thing about chickens that are similar to people is they love to sunbathe. I often will find my chickens just laying around, and it's kind of a disturbing pose when you find them the first time, but then once you know what it is, it's fine. They will extend one wing and one leg out to the side and kind of lay over on their side, and they just sunbathe, and then they'll switch sides and just are enjoying the sun. Inside we built this enclosure last year for the chickens, and we tried to make it big enough so that they had a lot of space to run and kind of do their own thing, and if there are some that aren't really getting along, there's plenty of space for them to go. But we wanted to make sure they had a safe space where it was predator proof and that no one could, none of the coyotes or any of the other predators around here could come in and get them. So we built this enclosure, and it's completely covered around the outside and the roof with hardware cloth. Some people use chicken wire, but hardware cloth is a lot stronger, so we decided to use that. It's a lot more predator proof. And we did the roof because there are a lot of predators that like chickens that can climb. So we wanted to make sure that nothing could get them from the top or the sides. Also, when we go out to the coop, I'll show you on the outside, we actually extended the hardware cloth out onto the ground about 18 inches to 24 inches and covered it in rock. That way a predator can't dig in from the outside. And it's a little bit hard to see, but we covered the entire top of the roof with trellis so that they would get some natural sunlight coming in, and then about a third of it is covered with metal roofing. That way when it's snowing or raining, they can still enjoy the outside. The other kind of interesting thing you might notice, I don't know if you can tell through the video, but the whole coop or the whole run is right now covered in plastic sheeting. So we put that up for the winter. That's probably going to come down this weekend, but we wanted the chickens to be able to enjoy this outdoor space even in the middle of the winter when it was really cold. And unfortunately, chickens can get frostbite on their combs and even their wattles, but mostly their combs if they are in a really cold breeze, just like humans. So we wanted them to be able to be out here. The plastic kind of gives it a greenhouse effect, so it helps keep it warmer in here, and that way they wouldn't have that big gust of wind coming through that was cold and wouldn't possibly harm them. So one other thing you might notice, the bottom of the run is all straw, so we throw out new straw whenever it's necessary. They like to just move it around and pick through it. Just gives them something it's an activity, and it serves as a bedding. Inside the coop, we usually use straw during the winter because it's a good insulator and keeps them warm, and then in the summer we'll transition to using shavings. I think that's about all I can tell you out here. We do one other thing we do for the winter is we do have heated buckets and heated water, so we make sure that they have fresh thawed out water all year round, but right now we don't need those plugged in, which is nice savings. So I'm gonna take the camera down and take you guys into the actual coop to see what that's like. Okay, so this is behind me is the chicken run that we were just inside. Like I said, the chickens have access from the inside, so they don't obviously have to come outside. But for us humans, we can't fit through that little chicken door, so we come outside, and right behind me here is the actual coop. This is where they go in at night. So I'm going to take you in there. I'm going to flip the camera around so you can see it. I think that would be a little bit easier. Just kidding, I don't know how to do that. All right, we'll just walk in. So this is our cozy little coop area. We've got a few hens that are in here in the nesting boxes. They're wondering why I'm in here. So I'll just kind of do a 360. You can see the different roosts that we have in here. We have all different levels, some that are a little bit lower, some that are a little bit higher, just so they can kind of choose where they want to sleep at night. And then you can see these are the nesting boxes. So this is where they lay their eggs. In the winter, we put a lot of extra insulation. You can see some of it's still intact. This will all be coming down again probably this weekend, since we're finally getting into some warmer temperatures. And then we also have little what's called cozy coop heaters. A lot of people think they're flat screen TVs. They're definitely not, but we've got a couple of those. They're very safe, just radiant panel heaters, which means that the chickens can get up close to them to be warm, but they don't. They have been tested and can be in straw and shavings and have no problems with catching fire. So they're very safe to use, but we very rarely use those, only if it's really, really cold. And then in the summer, we take all that insulation down, and we have two nice windows. We can see the animals outside. One to the outside and one that goes into the chicken run. And that we keep those open so it keeps it nice and cool in here and keeps the air flowing, just for some good ventilation. Other than that, I can't think of anything else to tell you guys. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if I'm off work tomorrow, we're going to do another e-learning lesson all about goats. See you tomorrow.